G'day off trackers, welcome back to another episode. So this week, Ash, what did we get up to?
We finally got around to test driving the next gen Ranger that we've got on order.
That we did. So we actually went for 2 drives. We took out WildTrack the first time and then took out the Sport, which is the one that we ordered. So ours is currently in manufacture at the moment over in Thailand. Expected to be here 24th of September, I think it was. So somewhere around there, 20th of September, around the end of September. So what I'll do now, I'll actually chuck on some footage of our very first impression when we first hopped in it and took it for a test drive. I will let you guys know, if you're going to drive one, I would recommend driving more than just once, because they are, well, what do you think? They are quite different.
Yeah, we had different opinions the second time around we had a test drive.
Yeah, so I'll roll that footage on for you now. Very exciting day. What are we doing today?
We are at Ford Moreton Bay test driving the new Ranger.
That's right, day's finally come. So the new ones have come, as you would have seen over the last week. All the videos coming up. So we've got a Sport coming. We're taking the WildTrack out for a spin because that's the one they have in the 6-cylinder. And we'll show you through the inside of this one, and then we'll also show you through the Sport. So we've got a blue one on order. There's a fair few differences with them. This isn't going to be your traditional review video with a whole bunch of facts. It's going to be more so us just giving you the experience and me trying to give some information from what I've seen missing from the other videos. So should we get stuck in and go for a drive?
Let's go.
So here we are, guys, we're inside. I guess the big one is this front screen. We'll run through that. So you do have to put on the touring pack to get any of the cameras. We didn't know that. There obviously wasn't much information when we ordered it. I'll put the cameras on now for you. One thing I have noticed, it is actually a fair bit laggy, which you've got to expect with such a big screen. So these cameras here, the front one, you're not going to get unless if you add that touring pack with the brake controller, and you also don't get the 360. One thing I've noticed, would you agree, Ash? The dash is very upright, which makes it really hard to actually see the ground.
Yep.
So if you're buying one of these for four-wheel driving, you're gonna have to add that pack on and get that front camera, because you're not gonna see much at all. And then your wheel placement with the electric, you don't feel it. Ash was better at it because she's driven a car, so maybe it's something you get used to. Is it something you've gotten used to, figuring out where your wheels are through electric?
I guess unconsciously.
Because yeah, when I drove her car, I could not tell what position the wheels were in because there's no feeling through the steering wheel. So yeah, with it you obviously get your electric shift. This is a pretty cool function they showed us, so I'll put it in park and drive, and then if you actually turn the ignition off, it'll move back into park by itself. So pretty cool feature. As I said, we're not going to go through too much of it. I did want to just basically show you guys the sound and the sort of general look of it. So when we get back from the drive, I'll actually run you through the full inside and give you a good look around. What's your first impressions, Ash?
Pretty nice.
Is it better than the old one?
It's a lot more features with it. So while Dylan is driving, he's been trying to put the camera on, and it doesn't seem to let you use the camera while you're driving.
So we'll confirm this when we get back to the dealers, but yeah, if those cameras don't work while you're driving, that would be horrendous for full driving if you can't use those cameras. So we'll find that out when we get back to the dealer. Okay, so I've gone for a little drive now. I'll give you my feedback. So for those of you who don't know, it's now got a 10-speed automatic transmission. There is no manual. You can't get a manual transmission on them at all. The 10-speed, I was pretty concerned because I know when they brought them out in the PX2 or PX3, I think it was PX3, they were a bit, everyone said they were a bit sort of moving around a fair bit, changing the gears. But you cannot feel this thing change gears whatsoever. It is seamless. So wouldn't be concerned about all the gear changes because you cannot feel it at all. The power, definitely if you put your foot down, you don't seem to get as much as you do in the old 3.2. But in saying that, you got the more torque. So it is, I guess if you want the torque, then you've got to upgrade. The suspension, unbelievably better. Like, cannot compare this car to Ash's. So for those of you that don't know, 50mm wider stance on the wheels. That was to accommodate the Euro pallet in the rear, and you can definitely feel the car feels more planted, and they've done a really great job of upgrading the suspension. I'd say that's probably down to the fact that Australian engineers designed the suspension. So I don't know, to me it just feels like you're driving a car. It doesn't feel like Ash's where you normally have the horrible bumps in the rear because the tray's unloaded. So I'd be interested to see how it feels with a load in the back, but unloaded this thing is beautiful and smooth to drive, takes corners well. That's my first impressions. I'm going to pull over and I'll give Ash a turn, and then she can have a spin, and then she can give you her thoughts on how she feels, especially being the other one that drives a Ranger every day. Run through some more features while Ash is driving. So you do get down the bottom here. I actually really like this. What do you think of this little cutout? Like just for storing stuff?
Well, the plus side is on this one, it doesn't have the gap. So a lot of times in my one, you'd put stuff down there like your cards and your phone and money, and then it usually gets sucked in at the back there, and you have to like pull it apart to get everything out.
How many driver's licenses did you lose down there?
A couple. We ended up pulling it apart one day because I couldn't find my credit card. Got in there, found 2 cards and a $50 note.
Oh, $50.
So at least that's gone now.
But yeah, that's actually down here is wireless charging. You stick your phone there, it'll charge. As you guys would know, this one now has four-wheel drive auto. So down here, you can have four-wheel drive auto or 2 high. Four-wheel drive auto is basically, it'll drive around in 2 high. And if you hit a dirt road, it'll automatically put it in 4-wheel drive for you, so you don't have to do that. Anything else to put out? So on the WildTrack, you get an extra little glove box. Just a little one here. It's not too big, but you can fit a water bottle there. On the WildTrack, you'll also get the fold-out drink holder. You don't get that on any other models. And then you also get this little bit here that is soft on the WildTrack. On the Sport, it's all this hard plastic like this. That's not actually that soft on either side. I would say that's still pretty hard. The sides here, they're nice and soft. The door handle, that's actually really nice. I like that new way of opening the door. And the seats, what do you think of the seats? Do they feel any different at all?
These are leather, so
yeah.
Of course they feel different to mine.
I don't think they feel any more comfortable or less comfortable.
No.
How do you find the seating position with being so upright?
Feels a lot more trucky.
Yeah, I agree.
Especially with the front, how it is more upright and square. It doesn't really dip down as much as mine, so it doesn't really feel like you're driving a ute. But with this, it does. And the upright thing, if you're short like me, that's going to be a pain. You're going to have to lift your seat up as high as you can.
I do that anyway.
Just so that you can get a better view.
So Ash came up with a really good test. What are you doing?
Seeing how tight the turning circle is.
So because of that 50mm wider wheel track across, that's obviously going to mean that you don't get as good a turning circle unless if they've done something to get the wheels to turn sharper. How did it feel? Any different?
not as good as mine. Like, it's not bad. It's better than Hilux or
79 series is the
79,
worst.
BT50. But
It definitely has lost a little bit of a turning circle.
Just a little bit, yeah.
So that will, for you four drivers out there, that will obviously affect a little bit on the track. I don't think it's going to be significant enough that you actually tell it's not a massively big truck still. The length of it will interfere with your ramp over angle. So that's basically if you're going up a sand dune. Geez, you got that to kick over faster. Didn't do that when I was driving.
That's my style of driving.
So anyway, the ramp over angle is, say you're going sand dune. When you get to the top of the sand dune, the middle will bottom out more on one of these than it will on the old Ranger because of the extra length. So Ash has now had a good spin, and we figured out I wasn't putting my foot down hard enough because she can get it to go a lot faster than I can get it to go. So I think I was maybe being a bit more reserved than her. But what's your impression so far? How do you feel the suspension compared to yours? So, good point. Ash is still on stock suspension. She hasn't lifted it.
No. Much more comfortable than mine. You don't feel any bump in the road. It's like you're driving on a cloud.
It really is like massive. I cannot tell you how good they have done this suspension. They've got it so dialed in. Power, can you feel the extra power? The extra torque?
A bit more power. Don't know the difference between power and torque, so don't get me to explain that one.
Okay, I've got a good one for you. The sound. Do you reckon this one is quieter inside?
Again, it's kind of hard to compare because when I first got mine, it was very quiet as well. Like, that was the first thing that my nan and mum had commented on, how quiet it was.
And then somebody put male wheels on.
Yeah. With wear, that would probably become louder.
Nah, it's more so just the wheels I put on it.
Or just your stupid wheels that you got for me.
I reckon this one's the engine. I reckon the engine in this is actually quieter than the 3.2. Because that's something you can compare against each other. Can you hear this engine at all?
No, I even have your foot down.
Yeah, but even when you put your foot down, it's more so the exhaust you hear than the engine. I reckon this engine is so refined and so quiet. So as you can see from that, we sort of had some mixed reviews. We didn't get any footage the second time we went because we wanted to soak it in more and not be just filming. So second time round, Ash, I guess what's your thoughts?
I felt a lot happier with it the second time around. I think the first time around, like, I wasn't overly sold on it.
I'm not sure if this is going to show up on the camera. Bugs everywhere. Good bugs.
Anyway.
Do you know, she's second
You
trip.
fucking lost me now.
Well, they're all over the camera. So Ash, after the second trip in it, or second spin, ride, whatever you want to call it, we took it out for. What did you think of it?
Second time round, I was more sold on the idea of it. I think the first time in it, and just the changes inside, I wasn't 100% sold on. Just the bigger screen, and just the way that the dash and everything sat felt very high. But yeah, second time around, I kind of got used to it a bit more. And I think you had the same issue because your seat was down quite low and you didn't actually just get to...
Yeah, because I was filming a lot of it and sort of concentrating on what I was saying, I didn't actually adjust the seat up to its highest position. So if you do have your seat down quite low in the Rangers, you actually, like, the dash is really high. I basically compare it to a Jeep. If you've ever been a Jeep Wrangler, they have the same sort of thing, a very vertical dash that sits quite high. If you put your seat up, then you get a lot better view over it and it doesn't feel as closed in. Second time around, I'd agree, I was a lot more sold on it. We also got to enjoy the tech. You really were going into the tech when you were having your spin. Is there anything of note you can sort of point out? Because you actually got more of a touch to it than I did.
Had a bit more of a play on the cameras around. So I think the first one, Dylan was saying that when you're driving, all the cameras would cut out. But we found that if you are doing up to 10 k's an hour, you'd still have that 360 camera view, because that was the main reason why Dylan was looking at it for full driving, was to have that 360 camera going while you're going through tight spaces and uneven terrain.
So you do get the front camera when you click it into four-wheel drive, high or low. That will then override that, and the front view camera will stay on regardless what speed you're doing. And you actually do get fake WildTrack marks on the camera showing where your wheels will end up. So for four-wheel driving, that is unbelievable. It'll be a game changer. You 100% will be able to do so much more by yourself and be more confident by yourself with that camera. And it also has a squirter on there, so if it ever gets muddy. One thing to point out, that is an optional extra on the XLT or the Sport that you have to add on, and if you add that on, it will delay the date that you get your car. Not too sure why, but that's just what the dealers are telling us. If you add on any of the packs, so with the WildTrack you can add a premium pack which gives you speakers,
lights for your tub.
Yeah, lights for your tub and overhead switches, so that would delay the delivery date of your WildTrack. But if you get the WildTrack, you get the 360 camera, the front camera, the electronic brake controller, the surround lighting. That's all part of it. So I guess that leads us into our big news. What are we thinking of doing?
I think we decided, or are thinking of, changing to the WildTrack.
Oh, I thought we were going to 79.
No.
Oh, I didn't get you across the line on the 79? Unfortunately, it means, swapping out of the Sport and into a WildTrack means that we basically now jump to the end of the queue. So if anybody wants a blue Sport, there is one coming up which we're happy to give our spot away to. What was the date that we're now going to get our new one? Do you remember?
March?
Yeah, so best case scenario was December, worst case March. So unfortunately it's going to be a bit more of a delay, but we just figured we would rather, with the money we're spending, we would much rather get a car that we're happier with. So what I thought we might do now, we might actually go into some stats. I've noticed on a lot of the review videos that they don't give you the full driving stats, all that information that's really important if you do touring or full driving. It's just not there because those guys that do those reviews aren't full drivers. So I've actually made a spreadsheet comparing a whole bunch of different cars, and what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to give the old Ranger, the 79 series and the new Ranger the stats for all of those, just because I think that's what everyone's going to be comparing now that you are right near that 79. So I'll bring those up now for you. Torque, was sitting at the old torque was 470, and the new torque is a whopping 600 Newton meters of torque. So that's huge. And what I'll chuck in now, so I'll put up on the side here or here, wherever. The reason we care about torque is Ash has a massive horse float, which weighs, what do you think? It's somewhere around 3.3 with your big horse in it.
I think, yeah, loaded with the horse on it, close to 3 ton.
So we do want to have something that has a lot of torque, so the engine isn't being pushed, pulling it. This one here, how's it go? Pulling the horse float, pulling the 3 ton horse float.
It's not too bad. Only you start to feel the weight of it when you're going uphill. But I mean, everything else has been fine.
So we just figured we wouldn't mind getting a little bit more. And then me, full driving, obviously torque's key, and most of the full driving we do is sand. And even I could feel a difference when I hopped in my friend's D-Max opposed to my BT50 on the sand. It was so different. So I'm definitely always chasing more torque. Give you the figures for the 79 series. So remember, this is stock standard. Toyota definitely undertuned their cars. For the 79, your power is 151 and your torque is 430. So power's a little bit bigger than the old Ranger. The torque is lower than the old Ranger, and obviously compared to the new Ranger, the torque and the power is well and truly smaller. The next one I want to go into, nobody has touched on the maximum axle load ratings. It was quite hard for me to find it, but we did manage to get them. Sent it to Ash in a message. So for anybody that doesn't know, you might have a GVM and GCM, but you also have to make sure the front and rear axles stay under this weight. So if you put too much on the rear axle weight-wise, and you could still be under GVM, if the cops weigh you, you'll be done. And they know the actual ratings of every car. That's why they have the scale set up that'll tell them the front and the rear weight. So the old Ranger, so the rear, I'll do the front first. Front is 1480 versus the front on the new one, Ash?
1490. So
1480 versus 1490, not much, only 10 kilos. The rear axles, I believe, changed a fair bit. 1850 versus
1959.
So there you go, almost an extra 100 kilos can be chucked on the rear axle, and that's massive. So that must mean they've really, with the new axle, I'll put a video on now as well, where we actually measured the axles and got the height. I'll chuck that on. So there you go, guys, 32 is around the main arm of the axle. And then I'll do axle to ground, I'll get that as well. So we're looking at probably 24 centimeters axle to ground. So this one's 38, so it's actually bigger. As you can see, I'll take this, completely different looking axle. So rounded where the other one's actually square. Give that back to Ash. I'll get the clearance now from the ground to the axle. You're at 23, so I think the other one was 24, so one bigger. So as you could see from that video, it is a smaller axle, but they must have made it a lot stronger to be able to do that. I'll just chuck in, just for argument's sake, the 79, because this is where the 79 comes into its own. So the 79, the front axle is 1650 compared to 1480, and what was yours?
1490.
And then the rear axle is humongous as well. Rear axle 2300. So that just shows you what I basically said to Ash is the 79 is built to be a workhorse. It's meant to carry heavy weight and be reliable, have no bells and whistles, no nothing, just be a workhorse. So if that's something you're after, you don't want it to be too comfortable, but you want it to just last forever, then the 79 is a good way to go. Unfortunately, you would rather a bit more comfort, so that's why we're going the Ranger. A bunch of other things in here. The ground clearance. This is actually a really interesting one. So the ground clearance on this Ranger is 256 versus on the new Ranger 234. And what's actually really interesting to point, the new Ranger comes with 31-inch wheels versus this one comes with 30. So even with an inch bigger tyres, it still has a less ground clearance. So without those tyres, it would have been well down on ground clearance. Remembering, for anybody that wants to stay legal, you can only do 2 inches above what factory is. So that means this car here with a 2-inch lift will actually be better ground clearance than a new one. That's the only place that sort of went backwards. You know, for a 79, they actually don't have that great ground clearance either. I will take back on that. The 79 series 235, so well lower than this one, and then sits about the same as the new Ranger. Your weight depth, they're both class leading 800 versus your weight depth on the 79 is only 700. These days they all come with a snorkel anyway, so the weight depth is irrelevant. The tyre size I touched on, 30-inch tyres as factory on this Ranger versus 31s on the new one and 30s on the 79. One big thing I was concerned with, a lot of this car is controlled through the computer. and I wonder what will happen if that computer freezes or fails. Does your car just no longer work? As Ash sort of said when I brought that argument up, how many issues have you had with yours?
0.
0 electronical problems. You're now up to what, 150,000 kilometers? So still fairly young, but there's been nothing in that 150,000 that has ever gone wrong with this car. So we're sort of backing forward that this computer should work and you shouldn't lose any of those functions. Anything else to point out?
No.
Yeah, I think that's it, guys. The biggest thing I can sort of point is that you should definitely do a couple of test drives in it, not just do one, because especially if you're coming from one of these, because it will be a real shock to the system. It is a big game changer. You reckon it's a massive step up?
Yep. It's going to be difficult for other cars to compete with.
Oh, 100% agree. The technology in this thing is psychotic. What about how much you can actually tailor the car to be what you want? So that front screen is actually more like a computer, and it controls so many different aspects of the car where you can tailor change things in the settings, which you just can't do on any other car because you don't have a computer built into it. So this car is, yeah, just next level with the technology that's in it. I think if none of the other car manufacturers knew that Ford was working on this, then it's going to take them years to catch up, and if they try and rush it, it's just going to cause them nightmares. So I reckon Toyota will probably get knocked off the top spot now. The money, do you think it's worth it?
I think so. If you compare with how much other utes are and what you're getting for them, I don't think there's a big price difference between them and
It's $5,000
the Ranger.
for a 6-cylinder one.
Yeah.
If you go the 4-cylinder, a lot less. So letting everyone know also, if you want a 4-cylinder one, there's not really a weight on them. You can pretty much go in, pick one up and take it home. There just doesn't seem to be much of a demand for the 4s versus the 6s. So if you did want one of those, yeah, the jump up from this was what, 50? Versus now obviously 77. But that's the problem now. You can't get them for 50 grand. You can't. The only car you can get for 50 grand is a Triton, and that spec sheet, I'm not going to bash on them, but that spec sheet that I did compare a Triton, and yeah, it didn't come up too well. So sorry to anybody that drives a Triton. I think we'll leave it there because we've been yapping on a fair bit. I hope this gives you guys a fair bit of information that isn't out there at the moment, and you know, you don't have to take our opinion, but it is a couple that obviously have had a Ranger for a while now and been looking around, so hope it helps you guys. As always, like, subscribe, comment, and we'll get out and do some more videos for you. See ya. Still nothing. Come on, you got to do something. I'm going to ask you every time.
You know how my kids' ponies?
So yeah.